Hi, Otbert. It's nice to see you again.
Hi, Douglas.
I'm wondering now that you're focused again on Asia after living here for a long period and moving back to Europe and being in Europe during the heart of the crisis and everything. I know you've been involved very heavily in the risk culture changes, particularly while you were at PwC and everything, and afterwards, and you know, even working for the government on improving risk culture in the financial institutions. Do you think there are lessons to be learned in what's happened in Europe for here in Asia? Because I hear a lot of discussion in Asia that what happened in Europe was really not an Asian problem. So I'm just interested in...
Yeah, Douglas, I think there are definitely lessons to be learned, because although the banks here may have been less leveraged, and therefore perhaps they would have come through the crisis a little bit better than the banks have in Europe. I think it doesn't mean that there are not lessons to be learned. I mean, the crisis has really kind of put a lot of issues on the table, and I think those issues potentially also exist here in Asia. And one of the subjects that we talk about a lot is the risk culture in a bank. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're in Europe or whether you're in Asia. I mean, risk culture is important everywhere, and from what I know from my experience here in Asia and in Europe, think a few years back, things are not much different. So therefore, I think the vulnerability that was present in Europe is also present in Asia. And obviously, Asia's also learned its lessons, and they've been working on risk culture, and it's an ongoing process. So surely, those lessons are already being implemented. But I think it's absolutely relevant also to Asia. Again, perhaps the impact here in Asia might have been, a little bit less. Better capitalization, maybe more liquidity, maybe less leverage. Yeah. But it doesn't matter that you're not at risk. It doesn't mean that you're not at risk. Yeah.
There's a huge amount of deleveraging going on in the Western banking system, and a lot of people are wondering what the impact of that might be. Yeah, the large banks are rethinking their business models and everything. Yeah. Do you think that might have an impact both on global market liquidity and global markets, the development of emerging markets, and also maybe on shift from investment banking to retail?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there is quite a big impact. So just to tell a little bit about Europe, and then we'll project it on Asia. But what I've done a study for the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs about the impact of the deleveraging and the higher capitalization levels on the ability of banks to lend to, for instance, SME. And we didn't do the calculations. We did more kind of interviews and to see how it changes the behavior of banks. And what you're going to see, and what you are seeing, what we predicted and what is now materializing, is that particularly so that banks are they're shrinking their balance sheets, so they're less able to provide finance. And obviously the industries that are not able to provide security easily, or that are very innovative, or that are a little bit higher in risk, they find it very difficult to get financing. And that then has an impact on economic growth. So economic growth is definitely being hampered. So I think the lesson of that for Asia is that you can implement regulation, but you don't need to do it all in 1 year. You can give it a little bit of time. The place in Asia is not on fire. So if you want to increase capitalization, or if you want to increase liquidity, or any other measure that you want to take, give it a little bit of time, so that your economy doesn't get held back by measures which are well intended, which may perhaps kind of cause some problem if you implement them too quickly and too harshly. Yeah.
I hear a lot of people voicing concern, risk managers, about the direction that risk management is going in, particularly the way the regulators are pushing a more and more rules-oriented, standardized framework. Do you think risk management is going to be an exciting area for bankers to, young bankers to start a career in, basically? Or do you think it might become like being a pilot in the airline industry, where the idea of flying is romantic, but actually you sit there with a long checklist and,
Yeah, I think it depends on the banks itself. Yeah. It could be either. So if the banks show that they are genuine about wanting to clean up their act, then I think it doesn't need to be like the airline pilot, just following procedures. So I think it can still be fun. However, if the banks don't take it seriously enough in the eyes of the regulator or in the eyes of politicians, then then you're just calling it upon yourself to get even more strictly regulated, and then indeed the scenario that you are painting may become true, and from that point of view it may become less interesting to be in risk management. So I think it really depends on the industry itself, and the industry I think needs to hurry up a little bit, because politicians and regulators, particularly in Europe, are starting to get fed up. Now we have the LIBOR scandal, and there's one scandal after another. So at some point, there's just no credibility left, and then you're just going to be regulated to an extent that you're really not going to enjoy.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.